My name's Nathan Smith. I'm Head of Product Strategy for Appriss Retail. With me today is Heather Bolling from the Home Depot. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about attacking omnichannel risk after the buy button. So what do we mean about omnichannel risk and what's changing in this space? Well, e-commerce purchases have got more interaction points, as I'm sure you're aware, between consumer and retailer, and different handoff points between other organizations. There's inherently more risk in the world of e-commerce. And traditional things such as card home present checks have been around in the industry for a long time. But really analyzing the behavior of how consumers shop and how consumers create fraudulent scenarios between your brick and mortar and then your e-commerce space is something that's evolving at a very, very high rate across the industry. And some of the leading retailers out there, such as the Home Depot, are taking great steps to look at how to control that part of risk within inside their business. This is probably a chart that everybody's seen, or something very, very similar to this, in that, as we went through the COVID pandemic, the number of e-commerce transactions spiraled. Part of that was because we couldn't actually go to some stores and some shops were closed. And that really drove an adoption level of e-commerce which accelerated sort of 10 years worth of growth in 3 months' time. What we've seen since then is, yes, some traffic has come back to stores, obviously, as most people in the room probably operate stores. But it hasn't come back to 2019 levels. It's stayed at that elevated level. And really that means that those risks around e-commerce or omnichannel risks have also stayed at that elevated level, and then really need to be focused upon to decide how we're going to attack those and how we're going to address those whilst retaining a high quality consumer experience across both channels. At Appriss Retail, we focus on providing solutions that use artificial intelligence and use machine learning to help make real-time decisions to address some of those risks. And Heather's going to talk to you about how that's in action today at Home Depot. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a generic view about how we see the industry. So if you think about profitability in your organizations and how it can vary by channel, and we can look at risk here, and risk not necessarily in the traditional loss prevention sense when you're looking at fraud and abuse, but risks around the overall mechanisms or the structure of the transaction and how that can impact profitability. This is probably a scenario here that many of you have seen, which is how we've conditioned consumers to buy and shop differently in the omnichannel world than the brick and mortar world. Take the example here of somebody shopping on an e-commerce site and deciding to buy some shoes. And they're not quite sure whether they need the 5, the 6, or the 7s in size in their shoes because they haven't tried them on. So retailers want to provide a great customer experience, so what have they done? They've made it easy for people to buy all 3 sizes and have them shipped to them. And people want to provide a great experience, so they provide free shipping, and hey, returns will be really easy, we'll give you free returns as well. But when you start to look at the economics of those transactions, they really start causing some challenges within inside the business. When you look at the top flow here on this diagram, if I buy 3 pairs of shoes with the intent of returning 2, industry average statistics is $10 per item per direction when you add in shipping, handling, restocking costs, things of that nature. You're effectively going to be in the hole for $50 worth of value just spending on moving those products to get into somebody's front door. So that's a $100 pair of shoes. Where is your margin gone? It's just all gone away. And this is why we're seeing major retailers publishing in their 10Ks that they've got increased sales, and because of the increase in the percentage of e-commerce sales over brick and mortar, they've actually got reduced levels of profitability in their overall organization. But we've made a rod for our own backs. We've made it easy for consumers to shop in that way. So how can we help consumers still have a great experience, but also walk back the risks in these transactions? If I take this same scenario, if I could have convinced that consumer at the point when they were buying online that maybe they should come to store and they could get those shoes from store today and they could try on the pair of shoes and get them today rather than waiting a day or 2 to get them shipping. Not only can I give the consumer a better experience, they get their shoes faster, but I've also got $50 to play with to incent that consumer to do something else, to go and buy extra products in the store. Just give them $20 free to go and spend when they get to the store. Drive an additional incremental sale, drive additional value in the transaction. So when we talk about risk in this omnichannel world, it's not just about the traditional loss prevention type risks. but these types of process risks as well, when we think about how can we curate and change a consumer's journey based on their behavior, based on who they are as a consumer, to give them a great experience and give the retailer the most profitability they can out of their transactions. So when we look at the major pain points in sort of the omnichannel world, what are we really talking about now? Well, returns, adjustments, and reshipments are becoming a part of life. Everybody's used to them, but they're also highly risky areas. When you reship goods, you've got risk of those goods being out. Not only have you got the transportation risk, but you've also got the risk of those goods sitting in somebody's hall or their porchway for 28 days before they decide to ship them back to you. If you look at adjustments, I didn't get my goods. Yeah, they were damaged, they were broken on the porch. I asked for red, you sent me yellow. All of those things are inherently increased risks. And they're also inherent things that people can game the system by, and they know that retailers are very sympathetic to. Right? If I buy a t-shirt online and I get it and I say I don't like it, it was the wrong color, if I call up the retailer and say, you sent me red and I wanted blue, frequently these days you get we'll just ship you the other one. Keep the one that we've sent you or throw it away. And then that drives behavioral changes. That drives people who say, well, what if I do that with every single one of my transactions? They may not have been an out-and-out fraudster, but now you've opened the door and given them an invitation to say, how can I game this system further and further to gain additional product? And this all needs to be balanced with making it easy for consumers, not making it obstructive, but stopping those bad actors in their processes. And really that's where AI and machine learning, and I'm sure everybody's bored of hearing AI and machine learning at every stand you go to, but this is where we can look at vast quantities of data about consumers and then make predictive suggestions about how to deal with that consumer. Every consumer shops differently, so when we look at the risk parts of their transactions, we should treat them differently as well, based on the profile that they provide. So there are these hidden costs in the e-commerce world. Excessive product ordering. We always know that people are overbuying because, I don't know whether I want the grape, cherry or orange. I'll just buy all of them and then work out which one I don't like later. And we've said that that's okay to shop in that way. It drives needless excess shipping and handling. Returns become a problem, lost in transit, theft, damage, and not least there's an environmental and sustainability challenge. If you're anything like my household, there's always a pile of brown cardboard boxes by the front door and seemingly endlessly large and growing every single day. And sometimes you open one of those and go, do I really need a huge box for this tiny little item that came up? And you feel guilty about the way that you shop. That's going to become more and more apparent for consumers, and therefore we've got to really look at better sustainable ways of how we look at the end-to-end consumer, not just on the selling, but on the returning as well. So as I said, AI can help mitigate some of these costs. We can help look at how do we change the transactions in flight, because we have the technology today to look at billions of items of data and make real-time decisions very, very quickly to change the journey. Heather's going to give you some real-world examples now of how the Home Depot have been looking at these challenges, these problems as well. And there's some very specific areas where that's added immense value back to their business, but also to their consumer journey as well. So, Heather, over to you.
Thank you, Nathan, and thank you guys for giving us a few minutes of your time today. So as Nathan mentioned, I'm Heather Bolling. I sit in the asset protection umbrella at Home Depot. My team really deals more with the in-store fraud exposure and risk, but we work very closely with other teams in our organization, which I'll talk about in a second, to build an overall strategy when you think about omni-channel experience and the customer. So before we dive into the material, just to give a landscape of kind of what we are fighting at the Home Depot. So in addition to our online selling channel, we also manage and sustain 2,000 physical locations across the United States, right? So when you think about that omni-channel selling experience, you're not just dealing with the e-commerce side online, but you're also bringing them into the store to conduct a number of different experiences related to that sale. In 2021, we did $150 billion in sales. And so, again, Nathan showed the chart earlier where it showed the rise in e-commerce in 2021. We grew $40 billion as a company from 2020 to 2021. So with that, we doubled our online shopping volume as well. So we are definitely seeing the increase fraud risk and exposure, and we have really been challenged the last year to buckle down and get a little more serious on some of the solutions that we're implementing. Like I mentioned, we have a heavy omni-channel presence. So more than 50% of our online orders are fulfilled from within our physical locations, and grossly more than 50% of our online returns are actually done in store. So we have done a really nice job of pulling that online customer into a physical location. What we have not done, and we'll talk about in a little bit more detail, is identifying that customer across both of those selling channels. What are they doing online versus in store, and how are we treating that customer the same in both of those places? We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then as a company, we also have a pro customer base, which adds a lot of complexity to our business. And as Nathan mentioned, when you look at customer to customer, I should be treated differently than a pro customer who is in our store every day spending $20,000 at a time, right? I may spend $20,000 every 5-10 years, but we have customers spending that on a weekly, daily basis. So understanding the complexity of that experience and being able to leverage tools to treat customers differently is crucial in our space specifically. So supporting an omni-channel environment. So these are kind of the three biggest things that we have learned over the last few years on the Home Depot side of the house. A strong functional relationship partnership is critical. So I mentioned my team deals mostly with in-store fraud experience. But, you know, we have corporate security when you think about associate fraud. We have our internal investigators, again, internal associates. You have chargeback team on our payment team. You have our online fraud team. So there's 20, 30 different organizations out there who own a component of the overall omni-channel fraud experience. And so making sure that you are at the table, making sure that you have a voice, and a lot of times inserting yourself into these projects or these discussions is the only way that we successfully get any fraud solutions implemented at the Home Depot. The second one is having a clear strategy and communication with business areas, right? One of the things we've done at Home Depot is created a steering committee. So once a month, representatives from those 30 different organizations come together and just give a business update. What are you looking at? What are you seeing? What trends are popping out? We may highlight a couple of investigative cases to say, hey, like, how are you guys thinking about this on the .com side? Or, hey, you guys are using this solution or this vendor. Is there the ability to potentially use that same vendor on the in-store side of the house, right? And so, again, that knowledge sharing and just making sure that you're being transparent with your business partners, I can't speak to how important it is at the Home Depot. And then the third is the ability to ensure a customer is a customer is a customer, right? So at Home Depot specifically, we have online, we have in-store, we have at-home services, so you can hire a pro to come in your house and do something. We have tool rental, where you can go rent a tool to complete a project, right? And a lot of times the systems that operate those various platforms are different, right? We have a point of sale system in store. We use a different selling system for online. And so how is Heather Bolling identified as the same individual in all of those locations, right? It's not easy. It's a lot of data. I mean, $150 billion in sales is a lot of data to cipher through and to link together. But Appriss has done a great job of helping us do that. And we're beginning to leverage that linking and that data in other areas of the business, which I'll talk through in a bit. But biggest challenge for us is who is this and what do they look like across all selling channels? All right, so again, just a little insight into Home Depot specifically, and by no means is this an exhaustive list of opportunities, but some of the exposure points in the omni-channel side of the house that we have fought and continue to fight. So we have a large problem with our store credits. We issue a lot of store credits, and they are highly valuable on the street. And so I'll talk again about this in a little bit more detail, but we've really gone after this the last few years to really try to tamp down the desire and the motivation of the bad guy. Returns fraud. So again, we have traditionally focused most of our returns fraud mitigation on the in-store experience and specifically in the non-receipted space. But we have taken great strides over just the last 6-12 months of really going after that receipted population as well as online, which again, we'll talk about in a little bit more detail. Price arbitrage. So we're on, as a company, we're on retail accounting. So markdowns and price changes make a huge difference to our overall accuracy. But a lot of markdown or BOGO, clearance pricing abuse there that we see between our in-store and online experience. Resellers, again, right, thinking through the online volume, looking at some of those heavy buyers and understanding what they're doing with the product. One account having 75 different delivery addresses, what's going on? How do we understand them, and how do we, again, treat them differently from you or I shopping once or twice a month? And then payment fraud, right? Your credit cards, your counterfeit money in your stores. Again, seeing the customer doing a lot of different things in store than online, but treating them as two different people. So our strategy to mitigate the exposure. The first one is understanding the motivation of the bad guy, right? Is it to get product? Is it because I am buying product with gift cards because I'm a reseller and I'm selling it all across the nation? So for an example, one of the paths that we've gone down the last few years at Home Depot is around our store credit problem. So at one point we had more store credits for sale than 4 or 5 other major retailers combined. And when we started really digging into and understanding like why is the Home Depot store credit like so sought after, the bad guy could make 92 cents on the dollar. Literally could sell a $100 store credit in the parking lot for $92 cash and walk away like a winner for the day. And so really trying to understand the motivation and then thinking through, instead of putting out small fires here and there or investigating high volume customers, how do we really chop the head off the snake and solve the problem, right? And so starting to understand, well, how do we limit or how do we push the bad guy away from our store credit? It is, hey, we want to force them in our stores to redeem them as much as we can, right? We don't want to be blind. We don't want them to be blind online, selling them to people all over the country. We want to force them back into our building so we can start validating that store credit belongs to Heather Bolling and she is the one redeeming it. So, it was a multi-phased approach. We had to stop taking them on our website. We allowed you to check out on our homedepot.com using a store credit. So we stopped taking them there. We stopped allowing them to check their balance online. So pawn shops would go online, validate the balance, buy the store credit from the bad guy standing there right then and there. So we stopped the ability to do that. And then the last thing we did was we started attaching names to store credits. If Heather Bolling got the store credit, she has to prove who she is in order to use the store credit. And our volume of store credits available online literally went to 0 overnight. So again, understanding what was motivating the bad behavior allowed us to actually implement a global solution to stop the problem. You saw far less fraudulent purchases online because the store credit was out of the picture, right? And so you start chopping off chunks of the fraud exposure and allow the teams to really go focus on the larger issues at hand. So understanding the motivation. The second one is implementing solutions. And I mentioned this before, right? A lot of times at Home Depot specifically, we're very siloed into the business that we own. My business is in-store returns. But being able to understand and hear about other solutions that the business are implementing and really thinking outside of the box and challenging your vendors to think outside of the box a lot of times to say, hey, here's the root problem that we're trying to solve across the company. Right now, you guys are solving it in this space. How do we solve it somewhere else, right? So, go to the table and big box ideas, like think outside of the box because a lot of our solutions have come from those conversations. The next one is, again, reporting those findings and being transparent. A lot of times we want to like hold on to things because it's our baby and it's what we worked on and it's our win and our success. But really being transparent and sharing those findings and the difficulties and the roadblocks, that is really helpful for other partners within your organization. And then the last one is looking for opportunities to implement company-wide, right? A lot of times with our investigation partners, my team works heavily with our investigations team. They'll release their executive summaries and understand like what failed to allow this case to develop to the point it did. And what is your after action game plan, right? Who are you pulling together to really understand what failed and how a solution could potentially solve the problem? And again, we're on a cadence originally at Home Depot to look at our policies once every couple years. But again, as part of that steering committee, pull those policies up and say, is this policy written to really allow us to do what we need to do to prevent fraud in the company? Does it need to be tweaked to allow for pilots or tests or, hey, we want to deny customers XYZ? But really frequently reviewing those policies and making sure that we are set up for success in the fight against fraud. And then this is just, again, we use a number of different solutions at the Home Depot to mitigate the opportunity in this space. These are 3 solutions that we use with Appriss to help fight this problem. The first is Engage, previously Verify. Again, our in-store returns opportunities, we've used this solution for right at 12, 13 years in our in-store environment. Traditionally very focused on the non-receipted activity. I'm coming in, I can't prove to you I bought it from you, but I want a refund. We are opening the door, we're live in 1 store, on receipted returns, right? So also not just the returns coming in without a receipt, but starting to look for that price arbitrage and those resellers and some of that other activity, but these customers doing it on a very large scale, right? The second one is Engage on our online platform. Again, starting to treat a customer as a customer everywhere. Because a lot of times they could be denied online a return, but then literally come around to the store that afternoon and we would approve it. So how do we start now cutting that customer off across all platforms? And again, thinking through how do you start on a dime making different decisions even at checkout for our online customers, right? I know you're going to call back and return this item within 2 minutes of buying it. I'm just not going to let you buy it anymore. How do you get smarter during the checkout experience to also start preventing a lot of this behavior from our bad guys? And then the third is the secure solution. So our investigations team is working on rolling this out in the next couple of weeks as well to our probably 1,200, 1,500 field users to start generating case leads and developing cases. But I would say the beauty with Appriss having access to so much of our data is these solutions are now based on a consistent data source and allows us to truly view the customer as the same person across multiple channels. Because that is the foundation of what a lot of these solutions are based off of. And with that, I'll kick it back over to Nathan, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Heather. So yeah, just to close out from here, so Heather talked to you about the solution Engage that we have deployed in Home Depot, and we're very proud to have Home Depot as such a great customer partner here. And really it's about making those real-time decisions. Engage is about making in-the-moment decisions using these billions of pieces of data and giving that consistent experience across the whole of what is a very complex organization. And really we can boil those capabilities down into sort of 4 benefit streams here, which is fraud and abuse protection, as we've just been talking about a lot here. But then there's also ways to incentivize a consumer. If you go back to my example with the shoes earlier about driving a consumer experience to drive somebody to store, there's ways of being able to recoup or generate revenue by being able to direct people to a channel where they may make another extra impulse sale. driving from that, reducing costs across the environment as well, taking out those shipping components if they're not needed and driving the consumer to a different experience. And then finally, sustainability. And I know I talked about this a little bit earlier, but this is an area which we see increased amounts of concern by consumers in general about how their own habits are sustainable, but also how the retailers that they shop with are sustainable as well, and whether they choose to shop with those organizations because of sustainability. So being able to make real-time decisions about curating or changing the consumer journey can provide you benefits in all of these different areas. As a shameless plug, if you'd like to learn more, please stop by the Appriss stand over by the main entrance over there. We'd love to tell you more and show you some demonstrations of how we do that in real life. So thank you for your time. We'll open it up to questions. If you've got anything for me or for Heather, we'd love to answer them. And thanks very much.